Hello, I'm Cass. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to a new reading vlog. The TBR for this video is kind of stacked, as well as some of the things that I have planned on doing in this vlog. Some things I've already done and I'm just going to show you the b-roll, that being a Renaissance festival that I went to in a castle, as well as a fantasy book ball. That was very, very delightful, as well as a midnight release party. So many things have already happened and I haven't even started the vlog, but I'm really excited about all of the things that I'm doing and all of the books that I'm reading. So without too much blathering, I'm gonna go ahead and go over my TBR. The first book being Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the third book in the Empyrean series and it recently came out. This was the book that I went to the midnight release party for and it was fun. I have been going to bed super duper early, so staying up until midnight, 12:30 had me dying. I was so tired. And the day that I went to the midnight release party, I drove 9 hours back from Georgia because that's where the Ren Fair was. So it was just like a jam-packed weekend and I was exhausted by the time I went to the release party and I just wanted my book and I wanted to go home. Now, shockingly enough, this was actually a few days ago and I haven't even cracked open this book. I'm really excited about it, but I wasn't like itching to pick it up like I thought I would. By the time I got my hands on the book, I was like, okay. So I will eventually get around to reading this, and it's a few days later and I figured that I could start the vlog and read this book. So I don't think I'm going to start with this book though, because believe it or not, there's other books that I'm more excited about, and those books being Dungeons and Drama and Dating and Dragons. Now, I've already read Dungeons and Drama by Christy Boyce. I read it sometime last year. I want to say last April is when I read it. Loved it. Was so bloody cute. It's a YA romance following these D&D characters and our main character that's like super into musicals, and she strikes a deal and she ends up working at this game shop and then playing D&D, and there's fake dating, and it's just so bloody cute and nerdy and I lived for it. And recently Dating and Dragons came out and I'm just so excited about this. This is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, which in my opinion should be like the standard cover. The other cover, like the original cover, is like turquoise teal-ish, which is fine, but like purple, like they go together so well. And it's significantly thicker as well, which is very exciting because I think this one's just under 200 pages. This one is just under 200 pages. Well, this one is just over 300 pages, but you know, I'm feeling it now. It might be paper sizes. Hang on. Oh yeah, never mind. It's definitely the paper size that is making the difference, the weight of the paper, because this has more like thicker textured paper and this one has more similar to like Bible pages. Not quite that thin, but why am I blathering on about paper? Y'all don't care. This is the second book in the series. I think it's more of like a companion series because this follows Quinn and this follows Riley. So we're following two different characters, but still has D&D aspects, still is going to be super nerdy and super fun, I'm sure. I've heard wonderful things about this, so I'm just so excited to pick this up and to experience the reread, because I read this book very quickly because it was a travel day and like it was a long travel day, so I just read the whole thing. Honestly, we'll see if that ends up happening again with just rereading the entire book. I don't know how much I'm gonna like talk about this because it is a reread, but once I actually start Dating and Dragons, we'll chat some more. I'm so excited about this. Then the last book that I have on my TBR, I actually threw on here last minute because I was checking my schedule and I actually have more time to film this vlog than I thought. So I think I'm gonna be able to get more reading done than I previously anticipated. And the book that I added was Graceling by Kristen Cashore. This is also a YA novel. Sorry, I think I just saw a map. There's a map. Sorry, easily distracted. This is a YA series and I don't remember who told me like years ago. Liz, I want to say it was you, but I don't want to be wrong. So I don't remember who told me like a couple years ago that I would really enjoy this, and I think I will. This follows Katza and she's I think the king's niece. Yeah, and she's kept her ability secret, but then one day it's revealed of what she's capable of doing. Apparently she kills a man with her bare hands during a royal banquet. So what's not to love about Katza? And then she ends up acting as her uncle's enforcer, and I guess kind of like an assassin, essentially, is like the vibes that I'm getting from this. But then it looks like she gets wrapped up in some sort of mystery situation, so I'm really excited about this. Honestly, this was not on my radar. Like, it was on my radar, but it wasn't a book that I was going to pick up anytime soon. But then I saw the new covers at Barnes & Noble, and I was like, oh, you're coming home with me, because the redesigned covers they're literally stunning. Like, I'm so obsessed with the art style and the colors and just like everything about all of them. I don't know if you can see like the other ones on the back, but I'm really excited. Hopefully I enjoy it, and hopefully I can buy the rest of the series, because I would not complain about having these on my shelf. So here is an overview of my TBR for this video. I'm very excited to be reading all of these books. I will be starting with Dungeons and Drama. However, like I mentioned earlier, I have a couple things of B-roll of, you know, past events that I already did that I thought I'd go ahead and just insert. The first being Castle Fair at Uhuberg Castle in Georgia. Now, this was quite the experience, and how I ended up in Georgia was also quite the experience. I am a fantasy cartographer, and one of my clients' names is Kristen, and she runs the Goddess Armory, where she makes these handmade macrame armor. Honestly, it's incredible. Like, I will make sure I link her below if you can go follow her, because she is insanely talented. But anyways, I saw that she was making an armor piece for the fantasy ball and the castle fair situation. I was like, oh, that looks like so fun. And she ended up inviting me because they had an extra space in their cabin and an extra ticket to the ball. And that is how I ended up driving 9 hours to Georgia and rooming with 16 strangers that I had never met. So that was an experience. Honestly, they were all so delightful, and I became friends with so many of them, and I hope that I can visit them again sometime, because it was so much fun experiencing this and getting to also go to a Ren fair in a castle and like walk on the castle walls and climb like the towers and see like everyone dressed up in the courtyard. It was so delightful. This was only the second year of Huberg doing Castle Fair, so there were still a few kinks that I think need to be worked out on their end, but overall it was such a lovely experience. Even if I did freeze my booty off, it was so cold. And I say this anytime I mention the weather, but I'm from Texas and I live in Florida. I'm not built for cold, and I also own like no wardrobe pieces built for the cold. So I'm going to be showing day 1 and day 2 of Castle Fair, as well as the fantasy ball, which I want to say was called like Realm of the Winter. I was such a last minute addition, and it was such a last minute thing that I didn't really pay attention to the details. I was just kind of like going along with everything, so I don't even remember the title of the ball. But I will show y'all those clips, and then I'll come back to you with a bit of a reading update. Some reading updates for you all. I did end up finishing my reread of Dungeons and Drama. It's such a fast-paced, like quick and easy book that it didn't really take me that long to reread it, and I did just sit down and reread it all in one go, and I'm not complaining about it. Honestly, these characters are so cute, and it was so fun reading about their nerdy little D&D group and the fake dating. I also think I figured out the reason why I enjoy this book compared to many other like YA high school books that I don't tend to enjoy, and I think it's about what motivates these characters and what their motivations really are surrounding, because in other high school books that I've read, it's about high school and prom and homecoming and things that I don't really resonate with because I never really was that type of person in high school. I never was one who was like overly joyed about prom or homecoming or any like school events. However, with Riley, her passion and her drive is about musical theater, and essentially the school is cutting their budget for a musical, and she's really determined to not let that go and not let the school cut that. So she kind of bands together with one of her friends and starts creating a presentation to kind of present to the school board to, you know, show that there is still interest in the musical and in the arts and that they shouldn't just like cut it. So I thought that motivation was much more compelling for me versus just like she needed to get a date to prom. I find myself a lot more disconnected to characters that are like that. So they still act like high schoolers and still have that like high school romance, that like pure cute love, but their motivations are different, and I think that's why I also like really enjoyed their dynamic so much. And also there's so much more depth between these characters as well. They both have things going on with their family. Riley's parents are divorced, and as a punishment for stealing her mom's car, she is forced to work at her dad's game shop, and her dad and her mom don't have the best relationship since the divorce, and Riley's kind of caught in the middle with trying to learn how to balance a relationship with her mom, whom she's so close to, and her dad, who she's trying to grow close to but still has that feeling of guilt getting close to her dad when, you know, she knows things between them aren't great, so she feels guilty about being happy around her dad and making memories with her dad when, you know, she's so close to her mom. So she's balancing that. And then we have our main love interest, which is Nathan, and his home life also is not like the greatest. He doesn't have the greatest relationship with his parents, so he tends to be at the game shop a lot more and have more of a relationship with Riley's dad, which creates an even more interesting dynamic too, because obviously Riley's trying to forge this relationship with her dad, but then she sees her dad already having like a sort of relationship with Nathan as well, and she's like, well, I never sort of got that. So there's just a lot more depth than just like a cute fluffy romance, although don't get me wrong, I always enjoy a cute fluffy romance. I just really enjoyed the depth that, you know, Christie was able to write into this book, and they're just so darn cute. And all the mentions of like board games, like almost straight off the bat, they mention Forbidden Island and Ticket to Ride, and Forbidden Island is like one of my favorite games to play ever. Like, I love it so much. I love board games, and it was just really cool seeing like Magic the Gathering mentioned and a bunch of other like nerdy things that I grew up with, as well as the nod to musical theater. I'm not like a huge theater geek, but I do enjoy like musical theater, so it's really cool just seeing all of, I'm sure, Christie Boyce's passions just like shoved into this book, and it was so delightful to revisit, and I'm really, really happy that I did. Now, I also did start Dungeons and Dragons, and I do have some thoughts. I'm not that far in. I'm on page, whoops, on page 58, which is chapter 7. Again, it's a very, very quick read. And we're following Quinn, and she's a new girl at this school, and she transferred in the middle of the school year, so not great. I can't even imagine transferring in the middle of the school year. Like, I went to the same school up until 8th grade, and then they only went to 8th grade, and then I transferred to high school, and that dynamic was so weird because even though I still was going to school with a few people that I knew, the majority of people like already knew each other. So dipping your toe into like dynamics of trying to become friends with people that are already friends and already have their cliques and groups is just so intimidating. And I think Quinn is portraying that very well, where she's like really excited to join this D&D game that she's been invited to, but also trying to like play it cool for, you know, they invite her back, and she's actually joining the D&D game, and it's a lot more serious than she had previously anticipated. Apparently they live streamed the whole thing and they're really serious about it. And our main love interest, what is his name? It starts with an L, Logan. I already have beef with because I'm a little confused on his motivation for being mean to Quinn, because the first interaction that they get, he was really delightful. They had like a little bit of a flirty moment, and it was like the first person at this new school that Quinn interacted with. And then when conversation leads to her joining this D&D game, suddenly he's really standoffish and really rude and does not want her to join the game. And I got really confused with this switch up because I'm like, that doesn't make sense for this kid to, you know, be very sweet and then, oh look, you found someone who you like and is willing to join in your passions and hobbies of D&D, and then you're just gonna act like a complete douche. Like, what? Why the switch up? I have my theory, and that theory being that their D&D group doesn't allow like dating within their group to eliminate drama, which honestly, like, good on them. That's probably a good rule, but I feel like it's gonna be broken because it's Quinn and Logan. They're on the back cover. It's their, like, I guess enemies to lovers moment, but enemies in contemporary are always really interesting because it's like fantasy books, enemies to lovers is like, oh, my family hates you and I have a knife to your throat and I have to kill you, versus contemporary, it's like, I don't like you. And in, I always get these titles mixed up, but in Dungeons and Drama, the animosity between the two characters made sense because when Riley started working at the game shop, she was really not uppity per se, but really disinterested and thought that it was kind of lame. And I feel like her demeanor and behavior really came off that way. And Nathan, this was his passion, and it's a place that he spent a lot of time at. So for Riley to waltz in here and then kind of look down upon the game shop, it made sense for Nathan to be a little bit more standoffish at the beginning. But I don't understand Logan's motivation for being standoffish against Quinn. I hope that my theory of like Logan wanting to date Quinn and that kind of being foiled by her joining the group becomes true, although I feel like that's like a little silly. So I'm not really sure. I'm not vibing with these characters like I thought I would, because I had thought that this was like a companion series where Quinn was a new girl at the school that Riley had went to. That does not seem to be the case because the name of the high school is different, even though they're still in rural Ohio. So perhaps we will get an overlap of characters, but it's a completely new cast of characters, and I'm still warming up to them because I really, really loved the D&D group in this book. I found them so charming and cute, and they all had their quirks. And right now, you know, I have to get to know them a little bit more. They're just about to start their first D&D campaign with Quinn, so we'll see how things play out. And yeah, that's my little update for now. But I did want to mention what bookmark I'm using in this book because low-key I designed it kind of with this book in mind, and it's like my dragon bookmark, but I added dice, and it actually pairs perfectly with the other part of the collection, which is just the dice. I have a new collection dropping February 10th. Those are part of it. And I thought I'd also show off the other collections because they're kind of cute, guys. I don't want to say this is like one of my favorite collections that I've created, but it's certainly up there. This is like my Valentine's Day swords. We have chocolate strawberries and conversation hearts. And then we have like a cute pink moment with sakura flowers and bows, which I love, and then a shamrock bookmark. And this one will come with like a random choice, so you can choose any one of the collections in case there's like, you really want this one, but then you only want one from another collection. So say like you just really want the bow one, so you can like split up the collections. Does that make sense? Because I sell the bookmarks in pairs of 2s. I don't know if that makes sense, but it'll be on my website. I'm really, really excited about all these. And like I said, February 10th, I will link my website below. It's Oakleaf Arrow Studios. You can also follow me on my Instagram, which is also Oakleaf Arrow Studios. That's typically where, you know, I talk about these things and post about these things. So if you want to keep up with my art, that's where to do it. But I just really wanted to show that off because I thought it fit perfectly with this book. Now I am probably going to read a little bit more of this today. I also have work I have to do, but like that's the story of my life. So I don't really know what I want to do next, but doesn't matter what I'm going to do next because the next B-roll you're going to see is actually from the Onyx Storm midnight release party. I went to the midnight release party hosted by Jade over at the New Romantics, which is a romance only bookstore in Orlando, and honestly it was a lot of fun. I met some people there, we chatted, we did like trivia and a coloring page and got our books, and yeah, I was really, really tired, so I wasn't like too into it, but I have my hands on Onyx Storm, which is very, very exciting, and I offered to donate some of my Fourth Wing maps that I've drawn. I offered to donate them to the attendees, so everyone got a copy of my map, which was also pretty cool to see just like everyone holding something that I drew. I'm like, oh, that's my art right there. I will start this one of these days. You'll see. I'm gonna vlog it, but I'm also having way too much fun reading Dating and Dragons, so I probably will finish up this book maybe tonight. I don't know. It's a really, really quick read, so I'm a little like torn about what I want to do, but I'll come back with you with a reading update. But for now, let's go to a midnight release party. I was honestly not planning to do an update tonight because I didn't think I was going to do any more reading, but here we are and I have an update for you guys. I did end up finishing Dating and Dragons, and I have beef with this book. Not like terrible beef, it was not horrible by any means, just a lot of little things accumulated to my overall impression of this book, and I can't say it's my favorite by any means, and it makes me sad because I wanted to adore this book so much and I just didn't. I'm so upset about that, but I wanted to pop on here because again, there's so many like little things that I wanted to discuss. So I think Christy Boyce took everything in Dungeons and Dramas that I loved and that made me want to read another YA book by her, and she said, nope, I'm gonna write a classic YA book that just feels so out of the range of what you would enjoy. Do we remember how I said about Dungeons and Dramas what I really loved was the motivation behind Riley's actions. Her sole focus wasn't about dating a boy, it was just like something that kind of happened with the whole fake dating situation, but you know, she still had the motivation outside of the dating and still had a personality outside of the dating. God, the relationship, they were just pining over each other the entire book, but the entire reason why they couldn't date was because of their D&D group said that they couldn't date. No dating within the group. And that to me just feels like such a silly conflict reason. It felt very unrealistic and it was just irking me because it felt so YA, like the motivation and the, we can't be together and it's killing me, and every time we talk, it's just, I can't resist you. And I just had to take many moments to just pause and be like, okay, like, it's a YA, you knew this, but I can still also be irked by the very not YA phrases in this book. Let me see if I can find one. There's one in particular that I remember. Okay, I found the line. Guys, this is a YA, and this boy, Logan, he is 16, and you got me twisted if you think that I believe any 16-year-old boy who plays D&D in his downtime would say this to a girl ever. In context, they had just kissed, okay? And Quinn goes, and out of total morbid curiosity if that self-control of yours had dropped a moment ago. And this is, sorry guys. And this is what Logan says. At 16 years old, then I had pressed you against that door and kissed you until the sun went down. And I was your only source of heat. That's so funny. Like, listen, if this was some fantasy novel where it was like a prince or like a forbidden lover and he was like, oh, I would have kissed you until the sun went down and I was your only source of heat, I'd have been like, okay, I see you. And this man, sorry, this boy plays D&D. And I'm not dissing on the people that play D&D, okay? I'm just saying, they're nerds, okay? I'm a nerd, okay? We're all nerds here. This is a safe space. 16 years old, okay? Sophomore, junior maybe? Junior, sophomore in high school. Sit down. Sit down. And that wasn't the only line that felt very like she was testing the waters of like new adult with the dialogue. It felt like whiplash because, again, these characters are in high school and their conflict is so high school. And yet they'd have these moments and the dialogue would feel very mature where it was suddenly like, okay, are these characters like 20 or are they 16? Because there's a big difference and you're not selling me on it, and it would really take me out of the story. There were so many cute moments in this book though, which is why I ended up giving it a 3-star, is because I was giggling and kicking my feet. Not as much as the first one, but I was. Speaking of the first one, no cameos. No crossovers. Why are the covers so similar, if not series? That is my question. I just didn't enjoy this cast of characters as much as the first one either. I felt like the first one, they all felt very distinct and we got to see some of the side characters and their interactions a little bit more. These characters felt very flat, and Quinn herself felt very flat. I feel like she didn't have anything outside of this D&D game and this like past drama with her friends to really like solidify her as a character. I found Logan I enjoyed a lot more. We got to see a lot of like cute interactions between like Logan and Quinn's grandma, who was a delight, by the way. I want to be besties with this pickleball loving grandma because she was honestly the best part of the story. Anytime she was in the picture, I was here for it. So we got to see a lot more of like Logan and his character versus Quinn, and I just felt like, I don't know, I didn't really like their dynamic as much as I really wanted to. It also was very insta-lovey, even though they weren't dating at first. Like the tension was immediately there and it was like all consuming. And I'm like, girlie, you've known him for like a week and you've had barely any interactions with him. I get it's high school and sometimes, you know, the teenage hormones, you know, you get swept away in the moment. I just found it a little unbelievable. I'm also just not a big fan of insta-love, so that might have also put me off. Like I said, a lot of little things. Overall, it was fine, but it didn't have the charm and the whimsy that I found in the first book. And again, I say first book as if these even went together. Again, why covers so similar, if not series? I don't regret reading this book. It's cute. I'm glad I own it. I don't see myself ever returning to reread it. I definitely see myself rereading, again, Dungeons and Drama in the future, but this one, low 3, unfortunately, and I am devastated by that because, again, I thought this was going to be even better than the first one, but it just fell short on so many things. So sad times, but I feel very productive because within a span of one day, I have read 2 books, which is already like half of the reading that I've done in the new year. It feels like, okay, half is maybe an exaggeration, like a third of the reading that I've done in the new year. I have not read as much as I wanted to. This last week of January, 2 weeks? I don't know, what day is it? Oh my god, yeah, last week of January, which is kind of crazy. How are we already this deep into 2025? I don't know exactly what my plans are for tomorrow. I'm done with the reading tonight. It is very late. It's 11 p.m. guys, and like I said, I've been going to bed at like 10, so I'm tired and I am ready to go to bed. So I think I've had quite enough reading today. I'm not sure what I'll feel like picking up tomorrow, or if I'm going to read tomorrow, so I guess you'll see. Hello. So the baking clips you saw were actually from yesterday. Usually I'm like, oh, the cookies are so scrummy and so delicious and I loved every minute of it. That baking was a disaster and the cookies turned out, well, not all the cookies, but the first batch, the bottoms burned because I usually make the cookie, like the balls bigger for the cookies are bigger, but I was like, no, I should do it smaller, but I'm so used to having them in for longer because they're bigger. It was an ordeal, guys. It was an ordeal, and I broke my hand mixer. It was one thing after the other, but I did start Onyx Storm last night. If we're gonna be so honest right now, I'm not like loving it right now. I am 100 pages in. I'm 98 pages in on chapter 12, and I feel like I'm just gearing up for another book where all Xaden and Violet does is argue and fight and test their relationship and just the entire time. And here is my problem with that. If this was not marketed as a romantasy series, I would have been a-okay with all the bickering and the bantering and all the fighting and stuff going on, because it feels like, you know, more political and more world building and all of that. This is supposed to be a romantasy series, and how are the two main characters so unbelievably insufferable? I am so over them. It's not even funny. And it's not like I'm not enjoying it. Like, if I hated it, I would have DNF'd it like 50 pages ago. However, I was just really hoping that after Iron Flame that we would get more of their relationship being cute. And instead, it's like anytime they're fighting, they're like at each other's throat at 1 second, and then they're like kissing each other's throat. And I'm like, what? Like, why? That's not romantic in the slightest. That's just like shutting each other up. And that's not how you're gonna work through. Granted, what Xaden is going through is very difficult, and I understand that Violet wants to help, and Xaden's like, no, I'm fine, I can deal with it on my own. And Violet's like, no, like, you literally cannot, let me help you. I'm just like, where's the fun, cute romance? And I think this is the problem, is that Xaden and Violet got together in book 1, and we knew that they were in love with each other in book 1, and yet here we are in book 3 and they're still together. But there's nothing major, like they're going, like, I don't know. It's like they're going through something major, but also like their relationship's not really being tested in the slightest, because, you know, they're still keeping secrets. They're still holding back from one another. Violet's being a huge hypocrite because everything she complained about in book 2, she's now doing in book 3. So I'm like, girl, your character development's going backwards. Like, what the heck? A lot of the side characters I'm not super invested in. Violet's main squad, like the people that are left in her main squad, I really enjoy, and I like their dynamic, and I'm glad we get to see more of them. However, all of these other side characters that have been introduced, I remember because I did a reread before I dove into the 3rd book, but a lot of people were saying that they could not remember who these people are, who their dragons were the people, like, nothing was clicking, which is totally understandable because Violet spent the entire 2nd book like adamantly not learning people's names, and then she like learned all their names like right at the end. So then you dive into book 3 and you're like, who are these people? What are they doing here? What's going on? And again, I'm not like hating it by any means, but it's just frustrating because I want this to be a romantasy. I want this to be fun, but instead everyone is just so annoying right now, especially our main characters that we're in the heads of. So I really want more things to happen. I was reading this one part and I was like, you know what? This one character, like, nothing has happened to them, and I would really love if something happened to them. And then immediately something happened and I was like, finally, but it didn't last long, so then I was a little sad. I'm almost like, should we start killing some characters off to make this more interesting? Like, I don't know. And I also saw this one video because my Instagram finally is not terrified to show me Onyx Storm videos, but someone made a video talking about how suddenly 3 books in, we're doing a bunch of world building in this book, and I have beef with that because I thought we did a bunch of, you know, magic building and world building and additional things in book 2, and I'm like, they're still going in book 3. Like, yes, you want to develop the world more, but also I feel like it's just there for like convenience sake, like, oh, this needs a solution, so here's this magical solution that no one has talked about at all because it was a secret. So I don't know, I'm feeling like a little mixed about this book, but I'm still going to read it and hopefully still enjoy it because, you know, it's so pretty and we love that. But I just want our characters to shut up and get along, or fully break up. I'm like, please just break up completely. Please date other people to add a little bit more spice to the story. And I'm not spice, like intrigue, conflict. Because again, all of the conflict between these characters is just instantly resolved, or they're just grabbing at each other with, they're like, I still love you though. Also, I'm a huge Dane apologist, and I actually really like his character now. And even looking back in book 1, you know what? I don't actually hate him. I think that Xaden is far more insufferable than Dane ever was. And I think the things that Dane did make sense, especially because it's a military thing and you're supposed to like obey your chain of command, but like that's not the case because Zane's out here like, I won't keep secrets from you, Violet, anymore, even if they're confidential. And I'm like, this is the military, like your entire world's at war. Perhaps we should, you know, keep things confidential, or maybe, I don't know, say that she needs clearance, like someone give Violet clearance for I can like legally give you these bits of information. It's just constant mutiny. I'm like, how is this military organization like stayed put together as long as it has? I honestly don't understand. However, I am going to take a pause from Onyx Storm. I will be reading it later, but I did actually want to start Graceling. I have the audiobook borrowed and I have some work I want to do, so I thought that we could draw the map together that I need to work on, and I really need to finish. I have finally reached a point with this map where it's starting to really take shape, and I'm really excited to see how everything looks because it's very different from anything that I've ever done. It's a sci-fi map, so again, very different. Usually I do fantasy. It's been a lot of fun, but again, it's taking shape, but I need it to be complete. So I thought that we could do some work together while I listen to the audiobook of Graceling. So let's go do that.
Cast Audio presents Graceling by Kristen Kishore.
Okay, it is actually a couple hours later. I didn't make that much more progress on my map, but I drew a bunch of trees. So y'all saw me just draw a bunch of trees. I still have to shade the trees, and I don't have it in me today to do that, so that's later me's problem, not today's me problem. I only made it a couple hours into the audiobook, I want to say. I was listening on 2x speed. It has a full cast narration, which I tend to enjoy, but I don't like the music as like an in-between in the chapters. That part annoys me a little bit, but I am enjoying the full cast. That's always really fun. I made it to chapter 11, which is page 106. Nothing's really grasping my attention right now. I don't know what I expected going into this book, but I'm already kind of enjoying Katza as a character, and we recently got introduced to Poe, which is someone that's sort of on her same level when it comes to fighting ability, and they've been sparring and practicing together, so that's been a fun introduction because up until that point, I was a little uninterested in what was going on. We've got an introduction of the world and these kingdoms that are all, not all of them are in war against one another, but there's definitely animosity between multiple kingdoms and some potential alliances that might be formed. The book opens up on Katza rescuing a royal, and we kind of understand that she works for her uncle because she has to, but she's also in this like rebellious group. And it's been fun so far. It very much so is YA. I'd almost say the writing reads more middle grade because of how simple and clean cut the writing is. There's very little prose in any form. It very much so is Katza does this and Katza does this, and then they all sit down for a meal, and then they fight, and then they do this. And the amount of chapters that end with her running is kind of crazy. Like, it honestly was making me laugh, like at the point where it was so ridiculous because, like I said, I'm 11 chapters in, and I want to say like 3 or 4 chapters end with her being like, and I ran, which it's not a major gripe, it's just kind of funny to notice. And Katza is also very much so not like the other girls. She doesn't want to get married, she doesn't want to have kids, she's a badass, people don't understand her, she doesn't need friends. She's very, you know, stereotypical, like not like other girls, but I think that with the character development, especially now that Poe is kind of in the picture and seems to be someone that I think she's going to befriend, I think it'll be interesting to see Katza in a new environment because she's never had a friend before. She's had like people that are part of the secret council and like co-workers almost and co-conspirators, but never a friend. So I hope that that goes in a direction, not necessarily in romance, because again, she's expressed that she's not interested in love and romance, but it would be really cool to have her have a solid friendship that she can build from the ground up and see that progress throughout the story. I'm waiting for more action to happen because there hasn't really been much going on. I was like a little bit bored, but again, the audiobook's really nice and easy to listen to, and it's very simple. So very simple read, which is lovely. And then I read more of Onyx Storm. I didn't honestly make it like that much further. I'm not sick of reading per se today. I just have so much that I need to do, and like sitting down to read, my mind is elsewhere and I haven't been able to like properly escape into either of these books, unfortunately. So I wasn't able to make as much progress into this book as I would have wanted, but we're doing what we must and what we can. I'm on chapter 21, which is page 180 into Onyx Storm. And I'm like debating not forcing myself to read this book, but again, I'm not like forcing myself to, like I can DNF it anytime I want, guys, I swear. But I am just so sick of these characters, and I don't know if from my reread of Iron Flame I still have like this lingering annoyance from that book that has carried over into Onyx Storm, or if I am just sick of our main characters. It's just honestly like probably the case. In fact, let me go read a little bit of a passage to you that perfectly summed up the thing that I was saying in the past update, and she literally like pokes fun at it through Riddick, who is kind of the comic relief character, but it seems like we may get a little bit more depth from him, which is cool. But honestly, he's probably my favorite part of this book right now because his jokes are the only thing keeping me going right now. But there has been conflict introduced to Violet and Xaden's relationship, and it is so stupid, guys. It is so stupid. It felt almost identical to the conflict in Dating and Dragons, where basically people were like, you can't date because we don't want you to, and it's so ridiculous, guys. Maybe that's why I can't take this book seriously. This is Rhea, and she goes, but he's right, you and Ryerson bicker like you've been married 50 years and neither of you wants to do the dishes. And Violet's like, that's not true. And Riddick goes, and it's always the same fight. He lifts his hand to his chest. I'll trust you if you stop keeping secrets. He drops his hand and scowls. It's my secretive nature that attracts you, and why can't you just stay out of harm's way for 5 fucking minutes? I'm like, that is literally like, you don't even need to read Iron Flame. That is the entirety of the book. And so far, once again, the entirety of Onyx Storm, it's driving me crazy. Like, I want to enjoy this book so much. I'm not trying to like diss on this book just for the sake of dissing on it. I'm definitely one who reads books because I want to enjoy it, not to critique them to their wit's end. But this book is bringing me to my wit's end because I want to enjoy it so much, and it's just not delivering right now, and I'm so incredibly bored. I'm like 180 pages in, and things have been happening, and action has happened, and people have died. That's cool and all, but I'm like, why am I bored? Why am I sitting here bored while reading this, and why do I not want to pick it up? So I don't know if it's a me problem or a book problem. I would love to know if y'all have read Onyx Storm, what your thoughts are on it, and whether or not like you kind of agree with me with like, did the beginning start out boring? Obviously, still a long way to go. Miss Yaros might surprise me by presenting some interesting action, but at the moment, I'm not really that impressed. So that is my little update. I am done with the reading for today. Okay, I'm done with the updates for today. I may do a little bit more reading tonight after Taekwondo practice. I don't know which book I'm going to dive more into. I'll just leave these both in my room and decide tonight if I feel like reading or not. But I really want to leave my house. I think that it would be really good for me. And I decided that I think taking a little trip into Barnes & Noble would be good for me. I don't know if it's good for my wallet. I don't have anything particular in mind that I'm looking to buy necessarily. I just really want to do something outside of my house. I haven't done anything since like my big trip last weekend? The weekend before? Time is relative. I don't even know when it was at that point. I'm assuming it was last weekend. What is today? I don't even know what today is. It's fine. I just feel like I haven't left my house for something other than a big trip in Taekwondo. So I think going to Barnes & Noble will be good. If I leave with a book or two, it's nobody's business. I mean, I will share it with y'all because it's your business, but it's nobody else's business, you know? And I just feel like, again, leaving my house. So let's go do some book shopping, which is very exciting. I never want to pass up the opportunity to book shop. Don't know what I'll get my hands on. Maybe I'll cave and buy the second book in the Apothecary Diaries. That actually sounds like a good idea. You know what? We'll see, you'll see, and then I'll probably share my haul with y'all tomorrow. It is quite late right now. It's already like 5 p.m. I don't know where the time has gone. I feel like I've done nothing yet done quite a few things today, and it's weird, and I'm annoyed by that. And I have Taekwondo practice at 7, so I don't have like too long to mosey about in Barnes & Noble, but I still want to make time for a little trip. Good morning and welcome to the last day of the vlog because I am determined to finish some books today. Actually, we'll get to that in a second, but let's do a little haul because like you saw, I went shopping yesterday. It was very nice. Although this Barnes & Noble was so busy for like 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, which is kind of crazy, but what can you do? I ended up getting 3 books and honestly, they're probably not what you expect in the slightest. The first one being Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is on my 2025 TBR. So many of you have told me that I'm going to love this and that I should listen to the audiobook as well, and fear not, I will be. I just wanted to get my hands on a copy as well. I'm really excited. The last time I went to Barnes & Noble, I was going to pick this up, but they were completely out of stock. So when I saw that they finally had some on the shelf, I decided it was probably a good idea to pick them up. And then the next book has kind of a funny story surrounding it, and this is In the Shadows of Lightning by Brian McClellan. This is actually blipped by Brandon Sanderson, which is another reason I kind of bought it, I'm not gonna lie, because I trust Brando Sando to give me good reviews. Now I have this new horrible habit of just buying first books in fantasy series because the covers are pretty and the synopsis sounds really intriguing, and then they sit on my shelf. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with this one. However, the funny story that I had mentioned previously was a couple Barnes & Noble trips ago, I've honestly lost track at this point, I wanted to buy this book and I had picked it up, I had put it back, and then I kind of walked away from it, and then as I was shopping in different areas, I was like, actually I will go back and buy that copy, and then there was like a perfect gap where this book was, which meant somebody else bought it before me, and I was like, what are the chances that 5 minutes later someone grabs the very book that I wanted and I just didn't hold on to. I wasn't that devastated though because I wasn't that invested in picking it up. However, I finally have my hands on it. And it's so funny because I pulled it out and put it back again and I was like, no, we are not repeating history here. So then I held on to it throughout the duration of my shopping and decided if I changed my mind, I would just put it back, which honestly was the better plan to begin with anyways. But look, it came home with me. So success on that end. And then I have one more, and that book being a classic, And this is Emma by Jane Austen. Now, I had no intentions of buying a classic, reading a classic, doing anything relating to classics, but while I was in Georgia, someone had put on the Anya Taylor-Joy's adaptation of Emma, and I found it so incredibly funny and comedic, and I loved the visuals. And while I wasn't like super invested in watching the whole thing, I did watch like a majority of it, and I thought that it would actually be kind of a fun classic to pick up. I asked Katie her opinions as well because she's actually read Emma, and she said she found Emma insufferable. However, since I've watched the film, I kind of figured that she would be. So I'm curious to see what I actually will think of this book, which honestly, I've already started. I'm 18 pages in, which is not that far. However, for me in classics, this is the first time since ever actually that I've picked up a classic voluntarily. All the other classic novels that I've read were for college classes, so being able to pick one up on my own is a very strange feeling. I'm like, wow, never thought I'd see the day that I would be here. Also, this edition is absolutely stunning. It has the gold edges as well, and the flowers are just, oh, they're so pretty. It's the Signature Gilded Classics edition, which is lovely, and it has a little bookmark as well, which I don't typically care for in other special editions, but because it's a classic, I'm like, handy. I will slowly pick through this book. My initial impression is that I'm actually able to comprehend the things that I'm reading. I think back when I was in high school, I really struggled reading classics because they felt very wordy and I just didn't understand a lot of the diction that was used. However, diving into a classic now that I'm a bit older, they're easier to read and honestly much more enjoyable, and I feel much more laid back knowing I don't have to write an essay about it or answer any questions about it. I can literally just enjoy it for the story. I did enjoy Jane Eyre. That's the only other classic that I've enjoyed. But again, that was for school, and I think for the majority of it I listened to the audiobook for that, so different reading experience. But I am already enjoying the 18 pages that I've read into Emma and getting to see some of their characters. I've already laughed out loud. I just think some of the banter and the wit in this book is going to be right up my alley. I decided that I wanted to read more into this versus continuing on with Graceling. I'm not necessarily DNFing it by any means. I just am not going to be finishing this book in this vlog. I may go back to listening to the audiobook because I'm not really enjoying the writing as I was physically reading. I only read one chapter last night because I read a little bit into Emma and then I was like, oh, I should read, you know, for the vlog a little bit. And I am just not vibing with the writing. It feels very middle grade, and I know I mentioned that previously, but it not being an audiobook format with the full cast, I feel like the issues I have with the writing are much more glaring when I'm reading it myself versus listening to the audiobook. So we're gonna take a pause on this. Again, it's not a DNF. It may be a little bit of a soft DNF depending on how much time passes before I try to pick it back up again. Like I said, I only made it about 115 pages in, so I'm not devastated that I'm putting this book aside. However, priority for the vlog, I do want to finish Onyx Storm. Now, I do have a massive update about Onyx Storm, and I kind of wanted to address something because I started editing this vlog yesterday as well, and I realized that the day that I gave my very first update on Onyx Storm, I was kind of having a bad day, guys. Okay, and I try not to push that energy into my vlogs. I like to keep things very happy and upbeat because I like watching YouTube for escapism, and the last thing I want to do is like lay any of my problems on y'all. So I don't think you can really tell. However, I could tell immediately when I started harking on this book like no tomorrow and nitpicking little things that probably didn't really need to be nitpicked and having problems that kind of made no sense in reflection. So I am going to keep my original like rant in the vlog, but I wanted to correct a few things. The first one being my gripe about like if this is a romantasy, it should have more romance thing in it. I had to take a second to be like, isn't it a good thing that this has more plot than romance? Like, shouldn't that be a good thing? Why are we complaining about that? I found that a little bit silly in hindsight, but sometimes I'm so passionate in the moment and get so caught up on like negative aspects of my feelings about books that I don't realize that like logically I'm like, oh wait, that is something that I should be enjoying. It's just because it didn't meet my expectations that I have an issue with it. So I thought that was a little silly and I wanted to kind of correct past me a little bit. I still stand by the fact that the first chunk of this book was was so incredibly boring. And the issue that I had earlier about like the additional world building, I don't think was as bad as I thought it would become, because I think my first update, I was only like 100 or so pages in and I was like, why are we world building more in book 3? It's like, girly, like that's how series work. Like you continue to world build. I just, again, some of my arguments were so convoluted. However, the first like 250 or so, let me see. Yeah, 250 or so pages were very boring and I was just not having a good time. Every little thing that they were doing were annoying me. I was just finding issue to pick on anything. I was on a FaceTime call with Katie while I was reading majority of this book, and I had my complaints laid out. One of them is silly, but I feel like it's silly enough that I have to share. They were riding horses and the characters kept slipping off the saddle. And I'm like, you want me to believe that these characters have the inner thigh strength to hold on to and ride a dragon, but they don't have the inner thigh strength to hold on to a horse that is walking, not even trotting or galloping, walking, and you have them slipping off the saddle? But again, it's not that big of a deal. I just, in the moment of being so fed up with this book, I was like, what? Why are we saying this? This makes no sense. I have no explanation for that, and I'm still like mildly confused about why you would make characters fall off. I'll shut up about it. It's not that deep. However, things did finally get interesting past the 250 page point. We're kind of traveling into outer islands that we haven't got to explore more, and that has been really fun. There's been some really unique cultures on each island, and some crazy things have happened. Some more characters have died, but honestly, they didn't affect me as much as I wanted them to. I know earlier I was lamenting on how I wanted more characters to die, but then they killed off like side characters that I'm not invested in. I'm like, no, that did nothing for me except for provide like a touch of shock value that I was not expecting. But also the scene was like really satisfying in a weird twisted sort of way, where again, it was very unique in how this death was delivered compared to just like being eaten by a dragon or being burned alive by a dragon. It was a very unique situation, and I thought that was really cool. I also loved that things are not really going their way right now, and that is very exciting because it's adding some more tension, some more intrigue. But one of the main issues that I have with this book is actually so funny, because in the past, and I'm gonna bring up the Poppy War and it'll make sense in a second, but in the Poppy War, Rin starts out at a military academy and then war breaks out, so they're no longer kids in school, right? They're soldiers in this army. And I remember when I first read the Poppy War, I was so sad because I wanted to spend more time at this military academy because I loved the scenes and I loved getting to see these characters interact in a school setting, and it was really cool. Now, they keep going back to Basgiath, and it's honestly weird at this point because we know as readers, like, they're in the middle of the war, and yet they just keep going back and being like, oh, well, I have history and physics that I have to sit in a classroom for. Well, I guess it is realistic because they're not just gonna magically be fully educated. I feel like it's always whiplash because they just went on this really dangerous quest where people died, and I get people are constantly dying at Basgiath, like, I understand that, but it was, you know, outside of their control and outside of like a controlled environment, and these characters went through something, they traveled thousands of miles, and then they're like back sitting in a classroom. And I just realized that I don't actually enjoy that. And the fact that, you know, the Poppy War, they never went back to school. Like, their school no longer existed, so their education, they kind of were forced to just be thrown in at the point that they were at. And I feel like that's more realistic. At the same token though, because of the benefit of having dragons in this series, it's easier for them to fly to different places, go on a mission, and then fly back. Versus in the Poppy War, there's not dragon riders, so any military expeditions that are happening on foot, and it takes days and days and days versus just hours to travel distances. So I guess that aspect makes sense, but it's still so interesting to know that, hey, a war is going on right now and everyone's gonna be fighting for their lives. They're outgunned, they're outmatched, and yet they're sitting in a classroom learning about history and physics, which again are still important because they, you know, need to learn for they can apply these things during the battles and such. is just, I don't know. I don't love it though. However, I definitely was having a lot more fun in the latter half of this book. I don't think I mentioned how far I am. I made it a huge chunk of the way into this book. I'm on page 376, so I have just, I'm trying not to spoil myself, but I need to see page numbers. Okay, just under 200 pages left, which honestly is still a very long way to go. But like I said, I'm enjoying a lot more, and I've been wanting to dive back into this book since yesterday, which I'm going to do. So I wanted to just give you an update before I finish this book, and because the next bit of B-roll, we're actually traveling into the future for me. However, through the power of movie magic, you will see it. I'm finishing this vlog off today. However, tomorrow night I have belt testing. So if you don't know, I do Taekwondo, and this will be my first time ever belt testing. I get to break a board. I'm very, very excited about that. And I'll be testing for yellow belt, which is the next belt up. Like I said, I'm very, very excited, and I thought that I would record and just stick it in here for memory's sake, and because I want to show you all me breaking a board. Hopefully I do break it. I'm gonna assume that I do and that things go well, but I guess we'll see, you'll see, we'll all see. But I won't know in the outro of this video, because I'm gonna finish this book, because I'm really excited to finish this book now that I'm enjoying the plot a little bit more. The characters, by the way, I still can't stand them. Riddick is the only thing bringing me life right now in this story. He is the only thing bringing me some levity from the exhaustion that is reading about Violet and Zeta's relationship that are still in turmoil. I'm gonna shut up now. Let's go break a board, and I will be back with the outro and my final thoughts on Onyx Storm. Okay, I feel like all that defending I did in the last update just turned around to bite me in the ass, because I'm so mad at this book. And typically when I'm mad at a book, it's because I really wanted to enjoy it. Again, I don't go into books reading them for the sake of hating them. I do not create videos just for the sake of dragging on books that are popular just for the sake of doing so. So typically when books that I really want to love let me down, that's when I get so heated, because I'm like, there was so much potential and this is what you have delivered instead. I was having so much fun until I realized how bloody pointless this entire book was, because all the plot lines that were introduced, they were either quickly resolved or they left loose threads but just probably aren't going to be mentioned again. This book felt like one circle, because where we started is where we ended. We haven't solved anything. Sure, we've killed off a couple characters, but also multiple times in this book, she pulled off a character dies or is impaled, and it's like, haha, just kidding, psych, they're fine. And I was really upset about that, because like, commit, man. Like, if you're gonna kill someone, kill someone. Don't toy with my emotions like that. And again, if it was like once, fine. Twice was pushing it. 3 times, be so for real. And again, a large part of this book is just Violet and Xaden being insufferable. Again, I don't know why I'm not finding Xaden as charming as other like shadow daddies. Like, I really enjoyed when I read Akatar Rhysand's character, and I feel like it's because we got to see a lot more showing versus telling. I feel like throughout this series we're just constantly told, and Xaden and Violet are constantly telling each other that they love each other and that they're the one, but all the moments that we get to see between them, they're not really like romantic or building their relationship. They're either fighting or fucking, and there's no in between. There was one or two tender moments where I'm like, wow, I wish we could see more of this, instead of just constantly being like, he's mine and I'm yours and she's mine and I am hers. I just wanted more depth to their relationship, and we didn't even get that in my romance fantasy book. And again, I was enjoying the plot so much until every detail in this book felt obsolete for no reason. I didn't know that this originally was supposed to be a trilogy. I thought that Rebecca Yarros has originally planned for this to be 5 books. However, I was doing some research and apparently it was supposed to be a trilogy, which now makes so much more sense, because this felt so pointless and it felt so fillery. And this may be a case of once the series is complete, maybe there will be Easter eggs that were necessary in this book, and maybe there will be things that, you know, really connect and make the stretch into 5 books worth it. I remember when I read like Kingdom of Ash, the last book in the Throne of Glass series, the first time I read it, I was not impressed whatsoever. And then upon a reread, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this so much. Now that I have the context of everything, I just adored it. And I don't know if that will be the case again with like the Imperium series, because on my reread of Iron Flame, I definitely enjoyed it a lot more. I think it's because I had the expectations of like, okay, I know Violet and Xaden annoy me throughout this entire book, so let's pay more attention and focus more on like the plot, enjoying that aspect of it, versus expecting anything different from Xaden and Violet throughout the entire book. And I think again, perhaps on a reread, I'll enjoy this more, knowing that it lends nothing to the story, but just enjoying it for what it is. However, I still think that there are a lot of issues with this book. One being as well the lack of like a recap from the second book. And it's so funny because in the past when I read books where they're like recapping things at the beginning of the series and like letting you know who these people are, I'm like, we don't need all this information, like we know this. However, it's because I'm such a big rereader that typically either I'm reading the series all in one go, or I do a reread before continuing the series, so I feel like I never need that context. I feel like this book needed some introductions. It kept dropping names of characters that I'm still hazy on where they came from, because like I said, I did a reread of Iron Flame. I paid attention to the characters' names, and some of these I'm like, where are these coming from? And then don't even get me started on using last names of characters that we literally never heard in the first couple of books. We got their like name during like introductions or something, like first and last name. And I get the whole military thing by like calling people by their last names, but I feel like the amount of characters and side characters and last names and dragon names and everything else that are in this book was just a bit too over the top, where it almost took me out because I just had to take a little bit more time thinking like, who is this person? Or I'd be like, don't really care who this person is. He's been mentioned for the first time in like 100 pages, and he's probably some professor or some random cadet or something. Speaking of cadets, that's the other thing that is so funny about this book, is I just can't imagine all these people in charge just constantly being like, oh, Xaden and Violet are at it again because they're two teenagers, I guess they're 20s, so they're two young adults that are just in love with each other and just screwing over our entire military operation and all of our battle plans because they have to save one another. And I just can't imagine like how annoyed that all the people that are like in power and who have years of experience being a writer, for like Xaden and Violet to come along and just destroy any semblance of order just because they love each other, and it's true love, and it's love unlike any other being. And it's like, have some sense. Rhiannon, we got a POV from her, and there's one line where she's like, I care about Violet, but she is only one person, and they were trying to like save this village or town or something and a bunch of civilians. And I'm like, see, Rhiannon gets it. That's why she's in the position where she's at, because she's just not sacrificing thousands of people's lives just because she loves someone. Like, it feels so selfish, and it makes sense because they are two of the most powerful wielders in this universe and whatever. But still, it's just so funny to think about the reports that these commanders and like people in charge are getting. And they're like, sir, they did it again. So while I did have fun reading this book between like pages 250 to like the last 50 or so pages, I just hated how obsolete, like I said, everything became at the end. And it felt like just a repeat and a recycle of events that have already occurred. The cliffhanger, while good, just feels like deja vu, honestly. And I don't mind the wait that we're gonna have to do because, again, I've fallen quite out of love with this series, unfortunately. While I will continue to read and buy the series, I'm sure, because I am nothing if not insane, I just don't think that this is going to be a series that holds up in my book like ACOTAR and Throne of Glass for me, because I really did love those series when I read them. I got to read Throne of Glass like while it was coming out, like the latter half of the book's coming out, and that is a feeling unmatched, where they're not per se the best quality of books, but they're fun for what they are, and the romance is a delight, and I'm not expecting like Brandon Sanderson level plots or like high fantasy level action. I just don't think the romance of the romantasy is delivering, and then the fantasy is just it's just not delivering either, especially because, again, if the last 50 or so pages did not happen, I probably would have come at you with a much more positive review. But alas, we're right back where we started, and it's fine. I'm torn on the star rating because I looked and I rated Iron Flame 4 stars, which upon reflection probably still stands true. I think I had more issue with that book on the first read, but on the second read around I actually quite enjoyed it, even if it was like way too long and drawn out. But I almost prefer it being too long and drawn out over, again, just having this plot go into a circle like in this book. So I'm thinking like a 3.75 is where I'm at right now. Maybe I'll change that upon further reflection. I don't know. It's just fresh, and the pain runs deep with the disappointment that this book had led me on. So that's my little thoughts. My big thoughts, I guess, on Onyx Storm. I'm really curious to see if the last 2 books in this series, when we do eventually get them, actually start having more things happen that are more substantial to the plot and not just adding plot points for the sake of stretching this series out. I don't know. I think that's enough. Now, to wrap up the rest of this vlog, the other books that I picked up, didn't finish, Graceling. Like I said, it's kind of a soft DNF for now. If I feel like returning to it, I will, but probably via audiobook. So let's just hope that I finish the audiobook before my library copies do. And then I did a reread of Dungeons & Drama and a read of Dating and Dragons. So both my exciting new releases were letdowns, which is kind of sad. Again, I wanted this vlog to go in a different direction where I was much more positive and I was loving every minute of every single book. But alas, that is not the case. And I don't know if that has to do with expectations or if like the books just didn't really deliver. Actually, I think it's a little mixture of both. I think I did have my expectations set fairly high for both of them, but I don't think that they delivered. And not only just to like my expectations, but just them being a good book. I don't think that either of the books that I read in this video were good. And I'm really upset about that. Again, I don't create videos just to hark on popular books. That is absolutely not my goal ever. I want to read because I want to have fun reading, not to just criticize the books the whole time. However, I still want to share my thoughts and my opinions because, you know, if you have similar reading tastes as I do, I feel like you can kind of draw from this video to see if you want to pick these up or not. And again, maybe things that I don't enjoy, you do enjoy, and some negative critiques that I have are things that you actually like. So again, take my opinion with a grain of salt, and I really hope that you enjoyed watching this video. I feel like I did a lot of really fun things throughout this video, so I hope that you enjoyed watching, and I do really hope to see you in the next one. Toodles!